Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I will say that I'm going to speak to you today probably a little more from the perspective of having been a systems integrator and sitting in your shoes or being in your shoes as opposed to my current role with D-Tools. And what I'll say about that is when I first got into the industry, it was one of the first things that we looked for is a piece of software that we could run our business on. And we were fortunate to find one. This is back in '93, by the way. That was developed by a company called Audio Visions and a gentleman named Mark Koppenberg called AV Wizard. This is old time. And so from day one, we always used industry-specific software. We were on that platform for a number of years, and then when D-Tools came out, we were D-Tools' second customer as an integration business, and ran the business using D-Tools. And obviously, I'm so kind of committed to that concept that I took this role as CEO of D-Tools down the road. So I just think it's the way to go for a variety of reasons, and we can get into the details. I don't want to consume all the time, but I am one that has walked the talk and believes strongly in industry-specific solutions as opposed to a hybrid of, we call them, best practice sort of approaches. I'll let Chris respond, and then I'll give more detail.
Having run a large integration firm, I could never imagine doing it without an end-to-end ERP solution. Businesses are complex for sure, and there are tools that are set up to do exactly what you need every day. I'll give you an example of something Word and Excel can't do. How are you going to hand out a work order and track time against it and all the product? It's not possible. And so pretty quickly what you realize is that you need to make sure you're using the right tool for the job. Word has a place, Excel has a place. They are not in actually running an ERP strategy for a business.
Just to bounce off of what Chris said, in specific applications for industry-specific software, I think you think about things that we do every day that are pretty unique to our trade, like creating wireless and wire labels, for example. And doing engineering drawings that are very specific. I mean, lots of industries do engineering drawings, but they don't look like a equipment rack or an interconnect drawing. They look like something very different, right? So there are very specific elements to industry-specific software that are unique to the industry. And the other thing to realize here is that these products, and I'm not just talking about D-Tools, I'm talking about all the different products that are on the show floor, have built companies that built software for the industry. They're built very specifically for what system integrators do, as opposed to something more generic like an Asana or a general like a horizontal project management solution or a horizontal proposal solution, and it just makes deploying a product like that so much easier because you're not having to customize every aspect of Salesforce or of NetSuite or of or Zoho or some other more generic solution. So the onboarding and implementation process is a fraction of the time when you're actually using a piece of software that's designed to do exactly what you do.
I'll add to the idea that if you want to force people to use substandard tools in ways they're not meant to be used, the whole thing grinds to a halt. It would be no different if we said, go mount this speaker and you hand somebody just a box cutter. It's just going to take longer to get that thing done, and human capital costs a lot. And I think from a human capital perspective, we want to take off the plate the things that grind humans down and don't add value to their day, and enable them to do more productive work. They'll be billable more for their time. And I think if you're trying to do that with tools that aren't built for this, it just doesn't work.
I would start by saying that I would kind of go upstream to that question and suggest that there shouldn't be an evaluation process unless the company has identified a why, right? So what's the reason that the company needs to or wants to implement a new piece of software? Because software conversions and implementations are challenging and time consuming and a distraction from the day-to-day. So I think it's really important that there's a reason to do it and a really good compelling reason to do it. So there's got to be some serious pain points and some issues within the organization or some strategic objectives that cannot be met without making some sort of change, right? So I think the first question is, why do it at all? And then it's a good, useful exercise to determine the value of a piece of software within the organization. So when you think about the efficiency gains that could be, or estimate the efficiency gains that could be, that could result from bringing on a piece of software, just say maybe it's a half hour a day per person, right? And you do the math and you start to get a sense of value that it has. That allows you to kind of create a budget. Well, okay, if it's anything close to that, or the cost less than that, or less than half of that, or what have you, then that's probably a fair price to pay when we're thinking about going through this evaluation process. I also think, and this depends a lot on whether it's a smaller organization of a handful of people or a large organization of dozens or hundreds of people, but there needs to be an evaluation process that's developed, like criteria, right? And ideally a task force that you go through in order to do an evaluation. To give you a little anecdotal story, but the first year after I joined D-Tools, I was out on the CEDIA show floor, and we sold over $100,000 of software on the show floor. It was mostly to people that hadn't considered it before. Like literally, they saw a shiny new object and like, wow, that looks great, I'll do it. And the percentage of those companies where there's success in the implementation is pretty low because they haven't got buy-in from their team, the organization. They haven't thought through the implications of making a change, and they don't really understand what they're getting into enough after a 20-minute demo or what have you to have made a intelligent decision. So there's got to be a process. There's got to be a team or task force or a person that's set up to do that evaluation, and then go through a proper business process before a decision's made.
What would you add, Chris?
One of the things I think about with software, everyone always wants the software to mimic their current business process, yet most people don't actually know what their current business process is. So you really need to have some understanding of that. The second is when people think they want it to mimic their business process, what they're really saying is, I want a completely customized piece of software just for me. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars. I used to work for a software company. You cannot afford that, and you can't afford the maintenance on it. So you should just dissolve that illusion in your head right now. Next one is we could do something that isn't industry specific, but is a great SaaS product, Salesforce or something, right? And you could say, we're going to build off of a platform and we're going to customize it. Really cool strategy. It involves a pile of human capital in your company to deploy that and make it work to mirror your business process. So it's better than a fully, completely customized, off the ground, coded solution. I've run businesses on Salesforce. I've deployed Salesforce at 3 different businesses. There is a 6-figure human who manages that every year. Now what's the cost to that on top of the software? So then you look at industry specific solutions, and this could vary industry by industry. But in our case, there's several options, D-Tools being one of them. These solutions, if your version is build it or buy it, the answer is buy it, right? Unless you are a massive organization and you have all sorts of very unique strategies, what Randy said about going through the evaluation process is true. You don't even need to do that. Go buy an industry solution. It's very, very simple for most businesses. It is actually your best strategy by far in most cases. Now, the other part that I'll also say, and Randy talked about kind of the evaluation process, he talked about a team of people. This is your leadership team or your executive team. there needs to be a champion who's actually leading this through. A champion has to really understand what it's like to deploy a piece of software through an organization. I mean, show of hands, who's got that person sitting in their organization right now? Right. And so that is a very specific skill set, and most companies do not have it. And so you need to rely on people who can kind of help navigate through that process with you more than just on your own. And I think that that's really crucial. It's kind of like the best insurance policy. And then there's the deployment of that solution. It doesn't matter which one you pick. You need to have effectively a project manager who's deploying this across an organization. Our integration firm was 33 people. We ran on an ERP system. People would say, would you switch to ours? And my answer would be, not on your life. Because the lift of getting 33 people off of doing it this way to that way was unimaginably difficult. Now, I think in most cases, most people haven't gone all in on their solution. They need to go all in on a solution. And so I think this big question is your company ready to go all in? So we used this ERP. We had 33 people running around. Somebody'd walk into my office and they would say, oh man, our piece of software sucks because it doesn't do this thing. And we would look at them very kindly and say, what makes you so special? This is used by hundreds of thousands of people every day, and it doesn't work for you today. Why is that? It's clearly because we haven't bought all in on the idea. And so I think, kind of to Randy's point about the why question, the next question is, are you committed to going all in? You must. There is you can't be half in.